Today is August 7th, 2017. I'm going to call to order the special meeting of the Salisbury City Council. Just real quick, in case of emergency, please make a left out here, go down the hall, make a right. There's some stairs. Go down those stairs. If that's blocked, make a left at the end of this little thing and go all the way down, and there's some stairs at the other end. Please do not use the elevator. At this time, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the legislative agenda. All right, so hearing none, the legislative agenda is not adopted. And at this time, we will adjourn the special meeting. We are now in work session. So is Susan here?
Susan, maybe.
Or, Theo. Where's Theo?
I believe
They're out and about.
They're out.
This council. I'm John O'Brien, Assistant Director of Information Services.
Okay.
I believe Theo and Susan, everybody's probably out on site.
Okay.
So,
All right. We will move that, and I imagine Chief Duncan and Chief Hoppus are, and Tom
Yes,
are
they
out
are.
as well. So, is anybody here for the historic design? I guess that would be Susan as well. Next up on the agenda would be the reorganization legislation.
I'm here.
Mark's here. So we're gonna jump right into the heart of the majority of what we're gonna be doing tonight. The other items, if they're able to make it, we'll take care of them at some point in the middle of that. Other than that, Mark?
Okay. As a result of the reorganization and the renaming and moving around of the city departments, it was necessary to go through both the charter and the code in order to update the names. As we were doing that, we found that, the current names needed changing. There were even some references to older departments that no longer exist that we tried to fix at the same time. So there were a couple typos, things that we found. We did not seek out every typo in the code, but if we were fixing a section, we tried to fix it with, if there were typos found in it. But other than that, it's pretty much just, switching things over from the old neighborhood housing and to the new department name, and, switching these public works. That was one of the biggies,
Yeah.
dividing it up between waterworks and the other thing. I mean, if you have any questions about it, it's the only thing I'm still thinking about doing is trying to simplify it a little bit. Maybe consolidate some of them into maybe 2 or 3 into one ordinance. We broke it up like this because it was easiest for us to just look at small pieces at a time and consult with the department heads and make sure that we got it right. But I think we might be able to trim down the number of ordinances in the end.
Because that's what
That's my
we were talking about, maybe getting you a vat of water or an IV if you have to get up
Yeah.
there that night. If you do it in one sitting. So, okay, I spent some time this weekend going through it, and so I don't have any problems with what's being done. Does anybody else have any questions, concerns about? I mean, it looks like it's a lot of stuff, but most of it is pretty much, changing
Name
one
changing
name
and
or
reassigning duties to the
reassigning
correct new
duties.
department.
So,
Yes. We're fine, I'm fine with it.
okay, Jack,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask, like you did the other night with the towing ordinance, with changing something in there that you needed to change, and I had asked the question about liability in the interim with legal activity that can happen, and you said that it was already in the original one that this could be changed at any time.
Yes.
And it would be retroactive back to the original date. My only question to you was, is there anything that you need from us legislatively to hold you over in terms of protection in case? I mean, any lawsuit I've been involved in has always been unforeseen.
No,
No, okay.
one of the only issues, and it really has to do with the city fees. You know, some of these sections actually recite city fees and amounts that are probably outdated, but they were superseded by the new chart that came out with the budget. And I'm probably, to the ultimate codes, I'm going to add that the previously passed schedule of fees, it will supersede as it, does everywhere else. That, we actually didn't look, for example, if it said there was a $50 fee for something, we didn't look to try and change that, because that would have just required even more research, which I don't think is necessary if we just state that the fee schedule will supersede it.
Okay. Jack, do you have any questions about all of that?
The only thing that I would suggest is that before the meeting, someone from the mayor's office review the names again to make sure the new names are the correct names there, because now we're messing around with the charter. And rather than go back and try to, change something again, just have them double check it. That's all.
Proofread it.
Okay.
Everything else is pretty straightforward.
Yeah, okay.
We are happy to do that. Can somebody just bring me up to speed? I apologize for being late.
Oh,
What we're
We,
looking
we,
at right now?
we jumped ahead to the reorganization legislation, and I think Jack's point was, just making sure somebody from the mayor's office could also double check that, what each position name is being changed to, just to do a double check in case something was missed, but everything looked pretty thorough to me. I spent 5 hours yesterday reading through this stuff, so.
I did as well, but I still think it's worth the effort.
Yeah,
Sure.
so.
Mark, is this conclusive, or we still have another section of all the changes?
This is everything at this point. I just suggested, one of the things that occurred to me after I turned it in was that we probably should add a statement about the fee schedule, making sure that everyone understands the fees in the schedule will supersede any section, any fees stated in here, because we didn't make an effort to fix them as well. I don't think it was necessary, given what we previously passed. Now, when they go ahead and do a total rewrite, of the code itself, that might be time for them to update our fees in accordance with the schedule, or eliminate them. But yeah, this is pretty much it. And except for the fact that I also think I'm going to try and consolidate them and have fewer ordinances if we can get away with it.
Okay.
I'm going to try and group bunches of ordinances covering the same office or department and try and use them in the same ordinance instead of separating.
Sure. So this won't be coming back to work session?
It shouldn't need to be, not if I'm just going to consolidate, because all I'd be doing is consolidating whereas clauses and sticking them together and giving them one ordinance number instead of multiple ordinance numbers. It'll save some paper and some
And
trees.
time and- okay, yeah, I think, and, so that we'll probably be doing that within the next month or so.
Yeah,
Or-
and I'm going to go through and do
Okay.
my best to pare it down if I can.
All right. Okay, thank you. You good, Jack?
Yeah.
So we have consensus to move forward with this?
Yes.
Jim, you good? He's good.
Yeah,
Okay,
sorry.
all right, so we have consensus on that item. We're gonna jump back to targeted neighborhood revitalization. I saw Theo just walk in.
I don't know.
Well, hang on, dude.
Did you bring out a flash drive?
So we don't have wireless?
I don't know. I asked, did you bring a flash drive?
Yeah, I did, but it doesn't just.
Oh, okay, okay.
Oh, cool. Do you want to do the maps first, or?
Up to you. You're ready to go?
Should we do GIS, youth data maps first? I'll just do it when we get to it.
Tornado warning.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a cool new,
I'm soaking wet.
That's a date.
Estimated here, that's a lot of, it's 2.5 hours ago.
Hang tight, Jack, we got a tornado warning.
No problem.
And you could actually see from the clouds, it was funny. 'Cause I was like, look,
She didn't look out.
We'll all get swept up to odds together.
We need to go to the basement, or are we good?
What's that? No, we've got a tornado warning until 5:15.
Is there any way, while Theo's on there, we could pull up, some sort of radar that tells us it's time to go?
No, I can start from there, and then when I get to the maps that PD gave me, I'll just switch over to you. Is that okay?
All right, there you go.
cover up.
Alrighty, how is everyone?
Fine.
No one's been hit by tornadoes or anything like that? Everyone's good? Did see that car flipped though, that was pretty crazy. Oh, multiple cars flipped, no.
I would like to add that city field ops, fire department, police department are doing a fantastic job out there cleaning up.
Absolutely.
Really doing a knockout job.
And DPNL. Doing a good job.
Should I?
Go ahead.
Okay, coolio. Alrighty, so Susan, Dan, and I have kind of been working on and off for, I don't know, maybe 6-9 months on bringing together a bunch of different kind of ideas we've been having with regards to neighborhood revitalization. You know, there's been a lot of talk at times, and I know actually Mayor Ireton was the one who kind of pushed for this initially with the Community Development Fund Initiative, whatever we called it. That yes, we are able to effectively tear down a lot of properties, but we still are struggling with abandonment and vacancy and vacant land. So I'm just gonna kind of first go over looking at where, you know, how we kind of got to this point. And I want to say for a lot of this, Salisbury is not unique in regards to these things. These are trends that are happening across the country. Many communities are struggling with vacancy and abandonment issues. And so if we look at, no, it didn't go through. Between 1990 and 2000, the two bottom lines are Salisbury and the two top lines are Wycomico. The left side is total units and the right side is number of vacant units. In Salisbury, we didn't see a massive increase in terms of new construction between 1990 and 2000, but of course in the county itself, there was, you know, a very large 1990-2000 boom, and the number of vacant inventory actually decreased over that period. So this is when we're running up, you know, getting into the bubble and about to hit the height of the market. And then between 2000 and 2010, this is where it really skyrockets. You can see that in the county, there was an additional increase in the number of new units. So just in 20 years, the county added nearly 10,000 new units. And that is a significant amount. But you also see the number of vacant units then skyrocketed in the county. It went from about 2,000 to nearly 4,000. And this is where this kind of vacancy problem comes in, because leading up to the crash, we were just building and building and building and had an oversupply, and we never thought, you know, we'd hit a crash, and then it crashed. In Salisbury, we find a similar trend in terms of vacant units. You know, vacancy really jumped up. And then looking at 2015, we're still seeing the increase in vacant units, and you know, construction has pretty much remained flat. I think we've added like 100 units in the past, you know, between 2010 and 2015. So this is kind of where we are in terms of total vacant units. This data is, the 2015 data, I should say, is actually an average of 2011 to 2015. So that's not 100% accurate, but we do have estimated around 1,600 vacant units in Salisbury. So at the same time, we saw our homeownership rate still dropped. So even though between 1990 and 2015 we were building a lot, we weren't necessarily fulfilling that supply. So, you know, as I'm sure Molly and Cheryl can point out, you know, homeownership isn't just about having homes, it's a matter of credit and enough income, low-paying jobs. But regardless of the reason, we did have about a 6% drop in homeownership in the city between 1990 and 2015. And then again, if you look between 1990 and 2010, you know, this is in real numbers, all in 2015 numbers, so adjusted for inflation. You saw that massive spike in the value of homes, about $50,000. You're looking at, you know, a little over a third. It increased in price, and then it, you know, drops again. So, and again, this is same across the nation. But so how does this, you know, impact us? Well, there's this cycle of disinvestment that occurs where, you know, all of these are interrelated, and even though I kind of showed as a circle, they interact with each other. So, of course, vacancy, abandonment, and blight can also decrease property values. And when you look at the property value formula, there's not actually a section that says crime. But regardless, in terms of rental market data, or property purchasing data, they do use that. And if there's more crime, people are less interested in living there, which decreases prices. So crime can have an impact on property values. When you have a decrease in property values, the value of your home and the property is lower, less of an incentive to invest in that property if you're not going to get as much of a return on the investment. That in turn has, you know, a neighborhood-wide effect where both financially and socially the neighborhood, you know, can have a decrease in terms of the investment in it. And then, of course, vacancy, abandonment, and blight. So when we look at what the city has power over, we're fairly limited in terms of the vacancy, abandonment, and blight. We really don't have that much control over property values. I mean, there are many things that we can do, but we can't systematically increase property values by 50%. And we have code enforcement to work on delinquent ownership, but after a while, I mean, if someone is abandoning a property, they're abandoning the property. We don't have control over those. So that's why in terms of this neighborhood disinvestment cycle, we're really trying to focus on what can we control? Can we decrease vacant lots, vacant buildings? Can we decrease the blight in the neighborhood, abandonment, et cetera? So when looking at what areas are most prevalent, Susan, Dan, and I kind of identified these three areas. These areas are not the worst in any particular category necessarily. You know, if you look at just juvenile crime, Princeton Holmes area is the worst. If you just look at vacant properties, well, the kind of the Hill area, Purdue Farms is the worst. But taken together, when you add together crime, property values, poverty, unemployment, vacancy, concentration of rentals, these three areas really pop out. And as I say in the report, you know, there's the Princeton Homes President's area is a very strong competitor. But one of the things we're also looking at is how can we impact the community, not just through building, but also through community centers and the like. So when we look at Princeton Homes and the President's area, we have two schools. We have James M. Bennett and Prince Street. So hopefully we can come up with some type of partnership with the schools to have more after-school activities and those sort of things. So here is I just used an online mapping tool looking at violations for vacancy, not violations, but vacancy registrations, condemnation citations, and boarded up citations. And again, we see this is kind of really what drove us initially looking at these areas. Definitely you can't really read it, but this says 50 and this says 52. We have.
What says 50 and what?
Oh,
says
sorry.
52?
This right here is supposed to say 50.
I'm sorry, we can't see where
You
are
can't
on
see
that.
my. Oh, you can't. Okay. Well, I don't know how to get the cursor to work. Let's see. What does this do? Anyway, we're right below 102. You see in the blue.
Oh, where it says
below,
50?
Below that says 50, and then top right's supposed to say 52. That's where we see a really large concentration of these properties. And some of these may be triple counted if they have all 3 violations. You know, typically a house first is vacant, and then it becomes condemned, and then it's boarded up, so that kind of add up. And again, the Princeton Homes, President's area, that's a close second. That's 20 at the bottom, 26 in the upper right, and then 23 upper left. Are there any questions thus far? Or do you want to just wait till the end? I just don't know if, okay. So then when we look at some part 1 crimes, yeah, that's really hard to see. Let's see, can I zoom in? There we go. This is aggravated assault. You see the most aggravated assaults actually occurred within the North Camden area. And then again, President's Princeton Home area is third and Church Street second. And then turning to burglary, again, we see a very similar trend. The A140, that's the student area, new zoo, old zoo, so there's a lot of burglaries in that area. But again, you know, pretty much by and large, the same areas.
The blue is not.
Yeah, blue is not severe.
So I'm looking at your 3 target areas.
Oh, sorry. Let me zoom out. So this is 5 would be green is 5, yellow is 6, orange is 7, red orange is 8 to 9. And this is where I like
so the top area is your North Camden Square or rectangle.
Yes, yeah. The red is North Camden. Yes. And like I was saying earlier, there are instances like this where these 3 neighborhoods are not the worst. There are individual instances, but taken together, we kind of identified these areas.
So back up a moment. You said these areas aren't necessarily the worst?
In any single category. So, for instance, you know, Princeton Homes might have worse juvenile crime rates, but they don't have as high unemployment, poverty, or vacancy problems. So we were just looking at where do all of these overlap.
Okay.
So if that makes sense. So, you know, in terms of burglary, yes, the worst in the city is either within the target area or right next to it.
And these are charges. These aren't.
These are arrests, I believe. I
So
don't know
they're
if
arrests.
is anyone from the, Christine, do you know, are these crime maps? These are arrests, correct?
Those are arrests.
Okay, yeah, these are arrests, so I don't think that's necessarily a conviction.
Okay, that's significant.
Yeah, but I mean, that's all crime maps, as far as
Yeah,
I know.
I know.
And then I'm actually going to turn this next part over to the GIS folks because I'm just going to show you what this looks like real quick. But again, this is where you see it. Now, this is...
Can you make that a little larger, Theo?
I can try. I'm just going to turn this over to GIS folks. Can you do your other one?
Good evening, Council. I'm Carl Flint with Information Services.
Thanks for coming.
How are you?
And he's gone.
Fine, yourself?
He turned it off and it's...
Okay. You don't have extend. Duplicate. And that's Y19. Okay. Okay, so we actually conducted an analysis based on 2 factors, looking at calls for service and the juvenile's arrest home address. So the juvenile that was arrested, their home location, for the years of 2015 and 2016. So right here we have the revitalization areas. Let me get this here. So this first layer is going to be based on the actual call for service location. What this is an interpolation, so it's a predictive map based on where multiple incidences were spatially. You have a more dense color of red towards the blue spectrum. So incidences like up here, just north of, Theo, what's this
That's
location?
Isabella, I
That's
think.
the
Oh,
Purdue
north
Farms.
of Purdue Farms.
The Purdue Farms area. So just north of there, you actually have two instances that have 8 to 9 crimes occurring on the same address. So this was geocoded based on the address that the call for service came from. So as you have some incidences like this here in the blue, that's probably 1 to 2 calls for service occurred in areas like that. So as we kind of zoom out to get the entire cityscape, you can see there's certain areas that have pockets of high occurrence of crime based on call for service location. Now, this is the 2016. This is going to be based on the juvenile's home address. So let me zoom back in here.
Didn't expect that.
So you can see just to the west of the, what was that, Purdue Farms area, you have a pocket of a lot of juveniles lived in this area that committed crime.
And that would be Pemberton Manor
Yeah.
primarily.
Correct. So there's several pockets around the town where that occurs. Now, of course, not all crime is committed within the city limits. I narrowed this search based on Wycomico County residents. There was some where the arrestee was from New York, Delaware, Florida, what have you. And that's the 2016 data. So this next set's going to be the 2015 calls for service. And you can actually see, you kind of have a very similar picture where you have a lot of occurrences in specific areas. Go back into the areas we're interested in. Sorry, we're dealing with over the network data. All right, there we go. So again, you have concentrated pockets of where calls for service originated from, almost very similarly to the 2016 data. Now, the 2015 home address, you do still also have this pocket here to the west of Purdue Farms, similar ones there, but again, there's not all crime occurs within the city limits. This was a very repeat offender that lived there that kind of skewed the data towards themselves. That person was arrested 10 times. So, does anyone have any questions?
What are you all wanting to evidence to us with this information?
I'm going there because I've already read through to the next step, short-term, midterm, long-term. So I'm not going to say that I don't think this isn't telling us anything that we know. I think you can see the work of Habitat and SNHS in some of the areas just outside our target areas, especially the one in Church Street. You can see where all that work has been done from.
It's been 11 years.
Yeah.
23 for us.
Yeah, so you can see where some of that has, you can see where the light blue and the blue starts to come back in from the red.
Yep.
That I don't think that that's anything that's, I don't want to speak for anybody else, but, and I don't want to say the word duh, but I'm going to say the word duh. And say, where do you want to go? What do you want to do?
Well, I mean, and I can get to the next part. And yes, it confirms a lot of things that we've held. I think something that I've wanted to look at is making sure that the data backs up our anecdotal evidence. In this case, by and large, it does.
But you say in here, because you write this from a first person, that the correlation from these things doesn't always match up based on your studies of other cities.
There's a correlation, but there's not necessarily always a causation. There are in terms of violent crimes, but particularly when it comes to vacancy. Like for instance, foreclosure in and of itself may not lead to an increase in crime in a neighborhood, but vacancy does.
Well, and I don't mean to sound like this, but that's fixing broken windows and that's 20 years old, so can we move on? I mean to sound like that, but this is a lot of paper,
yeah.
and it doesn't tell us anything that we don't already know.
Okay. Well, I mean, you're right. Broken windows in terms of a land use policy is something that's been around for 20 years, but I guess a lot of the core components of that haven't really changed. I mean, to be perfectly honest, we as a country haven't really figured out like new ways to deal with vacancy and abandonment. I mean, there are lots of urban areas that are looking at things, but we don't necessarily have the same concentration. So, for instance, some urban areas that have richer suburbs are able to turn vacant warehouses into low-income housing. But in terms of the basis of this idea, I mean, it really does come down to land banks and trying to remove old properties from the inventory, because a house from 1933 is not necessarily worth rehabbing if it's in deteriorated condition, and trying as best as we can to push up the market.
Then, all right, then let's go from there, because the Church Street one is in that state. Susan and I discovered that years ago, the Church Street Historic Neighborhood, which we never knew actually existed. Part of your other one here is in the Camden Historic District. Certainly there is a lot of African American history in the Hill and California. So as I'm looking at page 15 on the next steps, what, would you prefer to just continue to show us these, or do you want to go, Mr. Council Vice President, do you want to go to the recommendations and find out what it is we're going to do? Because there's some really big words here that I can get on board with. There are a couple other very big words there that are going to be very controversial when said out loud, so I prefer not to be the first person to say them.
So I think we've got
that is the next slide.
We've got 2 points here. We got some short-term solutions and some long-term solutions. So if you want to take some.
Yeah. How about I go back to the PowerPoint, because this was the next slide. Alrighty. All right, so the first section, financial incentives. Something I want to say is we have limited power over homeownership. That's something I think we just need to kind of accept as a city. We can't control people's credits. We can't necessarily control the median household income. So there are things that we can do, but we are going to be limited in the tools that we have as a municipality. That being said, there are some things that we can look at. So one of them is to expand our permit fee moratorium to include all owner-occupied housing, or rehabilitation of housing with intent to make it owner-occupied. It would not be a massive amount in terms of building fees. I don't know, Cheryl, how much are yours usually in total?
Sorry.
Your building fees for rehabs?
The building permit fee,
Yeah.
for our new construction that we do, it's typically around $1,100. For rehabs, it varies.
Yeah.
The way the contractor builds it into the price of the contract, so I'm not paying more.
So yeah, little, 1,100 for new, under 1,100 for current. So again, not a huge amount, but nevertheless, anything that we can do to kind of push it over. And then originally I had.
Could I ask this question, Theo, because a little further on, and I circled it, because you talk about the poor quality of the housing stock.
Yep.
So my question would be, is there not a correlation or a causation, because these are the words that we're using today, dropping the fees for rehabilitation in a place where there's poor housing stock? What's the suggestion?
Because I think we have to look at things in terms of a multi-pronged approach. I mean, when we look at an area like the Hill, there certainly are a number of houses that we can tear down and simply aren't able to rehabilitate. But if there is a house that's maybe somewhere in between that, maybe its value is $50,000 to $60,000 and it could cost, I'm just making these numbers up, $15,000 to $20,000 to rehab. Well, maybe someone would be interested in rehabilitating it.
Then is this, you talk in, we're on 7, you talk about parting with an LIHTC. You wanna-
Low income housing tax credits.
Okay. Because what,
Low income housing tax credits.
because what we consider low income
Mm-hmm.
may actually be considered higher income.
Yep.
To some people.
But
It's when we, we hear a lot about, Salisbury's bringing all low-income housing, but those numbers of what
Mm-hmm.
people can afford are actually right in the middle class of Salisbury.
Right.
They're not in, so
So I'll get to that, I believe, in 2 slides, but you are right. There's 2 different kinds of low-income housing tax credits, which I'll go into in a minute.
now, do they
if
have
that's
to
okay.
be low income, or can it be partnering with someone who wants to build a house and have it be market value? Hardy's real big on the market.
can
because He's
be.
going to come with those
No,
questions in a couple of
What-
minutes.
I'm
what-
not-
What
I'm
I
not
need
saying
to
it-
know is, are these homes privately owned, or are they owned by realtors or
Are they
landlords?
abandoned, or
Yeah,
Most of them are
yeah.
abandoned. I don't know if, Susan, you want to chip in at all in
They're
terms of
the,
that?
they're the ones that have been abandoned that would qualify possibly for receivership, or not everything that's abandoned would qualify for receivership. They have to kind of, different qualifications. So homes that, if they could qualify for receivership, we could do it in that avenue. Ones that don't, but kind of are at a dead end, we could go in that avenue. So say that a low-income tax credit contractor would come in and we could do it that way. They could buy it.
They could purchase the property from, let's say, a bank and demolish it themselves out of their own cost.
Just say it's one that is, it's been abandoned, but there's a lien on it for
Yeah,
$10,000.
there we go.
And there's no one there that can, there's no one that's willing to pay for it. They can just come in, buy it for
exactly.
a little bit of money and then turn it around, rather than it just sit there and basically demolish within on itself,
Yeah,
like some of these
exactly.
properties are doing.
Well, could I ask you one more question? How have we let these areas get in such bad condition?
It's not that we have let them.
I mean, it's 40 years.
Okay, well, somebody's let it happen.
Well, I think that it's, and I'm not coming necessarily to the defense of staff or the city or the people who own them, but there were a bunch there that were in sad shape before the crash. And then the crash came and they got even worse.
Exactly.
You have a boatload of people who walk away. And then what we found, and Mark can attest to this, is trying to come up with receivership to try and go get properties. It is amazing that people pay no attention to the property for years and years and years, and then when they find out the city's interested in it, all of a sudden we're back to, man's house is his castle, but apparently you can leave it there and blight everything around you, and that seems to be okay. I think if what you're saying is correct, we go and we not only try and partner with somebody, we also try and find somebody privately to do it.
Yes.
If worse comes to worse, then from what I can tell from what I'm reading here, you're suggesting that we go get them.
Yes.
That we go get them,
Absolutely.
and then we go and use either the partnership with the low income, or we go to
With
SNHS,
Habitat,
or we go to
SNHS,
Habitat,
whomever.
and we say, okay, my concern, and I think this will piggyback on your, April, is those people who left it, we're now willing to say to them, you don't have to be responsible for this anymore.
I don't know if we have a choice, is what I'm saying.
Okay.
I'm saying that we have, there's one property that, there's one property that the owner may actually still be alive, that has been in tax sale for between 20 years, and it's now accrued $50 to $80,000 worth of fines and liens and grass
So how come
cuttings.
receivership hasn't been started on that?
It's a vacant lot, and we can do receivership, and I think that's a question for legal. Is receivership quicker and cheaper than foreclosing on a right of redemption? And I think that's where we kind of have to come up with some type of, for lack of a better term, work group, where we go through these properties in these areas and say, well, does it qualify for receivership? And if we, say yes, is it cheaper to go through receivership than foreclosing on a right of redemption? Something like that.
If it did, it means that the city would at some point have to write off its bills.
Oh,
I mean,
fine.
no,
And
no,
that's a
either
whole different
way.
story.
One determining factor, receivership versus tax sales, is how bad the title is.
Mhm.
And when you think of how many legal fees have to be put into fixing some of
Yep.
these, one of the biggest problems with the blighted properties is what you said earlier, Jim, people walking away.
Mhm.
A lot of elderly people who just get sick and can't live there anymore, and they just walk away, and their families don't come in and
Pick up.
take care of the place, they just abandon it. So the things, expenses, taxes build up over time. If we could get a hold of these properties as soon as that happened, instead of letting them sit for years, that would be wonderful. But often once that person dies, there might be 5 children with an
Yep.
interest in the property, and if we try and go the route of receivership, we have to deal with all 5. If we let it go to tax sale, then it's much simpler because,
When does the property get to, it says the acquisition of these properties would outweigh the multi-year cost of leaving them the way they are.
Yep.
Okay. An alternative to tax sale, you're gonna make me say the word, aren't you?
I can say eminent domain
Yeah,
if you want.
it just, when does it get to that? Is that the last option and we've exhausted all the rest of these?
Yes, and if it's cheaper, and honestly, we don't know. Because, and this is kind of like it is what Mark's saying. Under eminent domain, we would have to pay fair value. But if they owe us $80,000 for a $5,000 lot, we are not giving whoever it is, most likely a person who's passed, that money, so it comes down to legal fees. What's the cheapest route? And I think that's just something we have to, be in consultation with
that's a case
our
by
lawyer.
case.
Yeah,
basis.
exactly,
Case
exactly. But right now we don't have eminent domain powers for neighborhood revitalization, so we don't have that as an option.
Are the properties in these 3 areas, in your best judgment, the 2 of you, how many of them are poor quality housing stock and should be torn down? Regardless of how we get them. Let's just leave that off the table because I think that's Community Development Corporation, that's somebody doing it all the time. If you could deal with that blight, how many of them come down?
5% or less.
5% or less are poor housing quality stock.
That should be torn down.
It should be
They should
torn
be torn down.
95% then.
5, yes.
No, 5% have deteriorated to the point that they need to be torn down.
Yes, 5%.
In terms
should be
of
demolished.
what you'd,
So the rest of them are just boarded up or empty, but still have the possibility of the rehab being enough to make them viable?
I'm talking about the total housing stock, and then I could give you a percentage of those.
I was just going in the 3 areas.
are you talking about?
Could we discuss what viable means? Because just because someone could take up residence in a home doesn't mean an individual's inclined to take up residence in that home. There's certain living standards that people have. They have an expectation of more bathrooms, more bedrooms. And if we look at the earlier charts that we put up there, we said that there is an increase in new housing stock. How many of those are vacant? If we see that very few of those are vacant and the older housing stock is vacant, then it's an indication that the housing stock itself isn't what people want. And I think it's
That's
interesting,
100% right.
in that slide there, and we tend to have this strange preference for home ownership. I think as a city, we should be neutral. We shouldn't have a preference for either party, especially since our city is predominantly renters. Everyone can't afford a home.
Right.
It's precarious. And then what we're talking about now is the negative byproduct of home ownership. So then why are we still compelling that onto people? And some people will take up residence in these homes that don't really meet current living standards to their own peril.
Right.
They'll take ownership of a home that has 1 bedroom, 3 bathrooms because that's acceptable to them, but they don't realize when they need to turn around and put that back on the market, no one's going to want it.
So I guess
You meant
to
3 bedrooms and 1 bath.
Yeah, 3
Yeah.
bedrooms,
I
1
was
bath.
like,
Yeah,
that's
3
my
bathrooms, 1
house
bedroom.
now.
3 bedrooms, 1 bath. Now, there's an individual that wanted to make a comment. Does she need to fill out the slip in order to?
Well, she represents one of the organizations that's a part of this plan. I mean, if you want to come up.
Yeah, just real
Join the
quick,
conversation.
there's 2 main reasons for home ownership. One is the homeowners themselves. A Harvard study has found, they've done this every year, that even when you remove the value of a home, a family that lives in an owner-occupied home of the same income as a renter-occupied home has about 10 times as much worth.
I know that's
And
true. I know
that's
true.
even when you eliminate the value of the home. So there is a strong argument for that. And then at the same time, there is a correlation between home ownership and decreased crime, better quality of housing. I mean,
I don't know that's true. So
Okay.
if I'm living in an apartment complex, there's a lot more people in that area as opposed to single-family homes. So it would appear as if there's decreased crime, but that's not necessarily the case. It's just you have more people in one area, so you have more incidents of human behavior.
right.
I
Well, I mean,
don't- I don't-
that's what I'm
and then
saying.
also,
There's
we do
no
live in a society
causation.
where we will point at different groups and their behaviors, and we will criminalize it.
Right.
And police are more inclined to arrest certain people.
Yes, I
of this
completely-
certain
So
appearance.
let me
I
ask
completely agree
Councilman
with
Hart,
you, but-
Councilman Rudisil this. I don't agree or disagree. But you were espousing in earlier meetings of the market will take care of it. What do you say to Salisbury after you say what you just said and the market will take care of it? What do you say to Salisbury?
There is no.
I don't mean to put you on the spot,
Yeah,
but
yeah, it puts
and
me
I
on the
love
spot.
it because we haven't had this type of intellectual
Oh gosh.
in years, and it's wonderful. But I want the cameras on because the market gurus.
This is why I
will tell
said
us-
I need ride to the Valkyrie
I'm
when
not
I come up
educated
here.
on the market, but in my cursory observation, when I lived on Maryland Avenue, I thought it was interesting that community was considered a historic district. So that creates a barrier of entry because
Yes.
the work you do on the home is more expensive. So there's that. Then I also think it's interesting that we actually don't want people coming in and creating rental properties when there's a market for it because it's not far from the university. Students that attend the university could be in these properties that are empty, and the city can do a better job of regulating what's happening with these properties because whenever one individual is providing a service to another individual, it's more appropriate for the law to intervene and create regulations. So these are areas that could have people in them, but we have this major, we seem to be put off by the idea of wealth being transferred from one person to another, but that's the basis of our nation. We're a capitalistic nation.
Right.
So I don't necessarily, I mean, sure, I understand. Wealth comes with home ownership. I am a homeowner at this time, but I was raised a renter, and being a renter, we have to get this negative connotation off of it. We
Right,
have to
and
keep in mind the majority of our city
I'm
renters.
not disagreeing with that, and that's why I'm saying that we need to start looking at low-income housing tax credits. That's something that we have not done as a city because we have been solely focused on home ownership.
I want to hear from this person. She's enthusiastically putting up her hand, and I
You
just,
can,
Well, before we do that, because these two partners that we have here, I was hoping that if we got a solid number, if we could get a solid number of the number of properties we're talking about in these 3 areas, because that isn't going to push everybody into home ownership. So we could take these 3, take our available options, because they're asking for some money here, they're asking for some legislation here. It'd be nice to see that, and then I would like to find out whether or not the number that they have in their head of what they could do and what we could do to make it cost effective for the partners or some other entity, whether or not the partners could handle the volume that you're
I
talking
agree.
about. And let's get started.
I agree. Molly?
Because this, yeah, what do you got?
Okay, so a couple of things with the Church Street neighborhood, because that's where we're, that's our focus target area right now. The biggest roadblock I'm seeing is that the lots that I have to work with, my inventory, they're very small. And with the current setbacks, it would be terrific if Habitat could partner with you guys and I could identify the lots that I want that are next to the lots I already have. So I can build a better house that's
Yep.
more attractive, that appeals to
Yep.
what people want, that have more bedrooms. Like right now, I'm challenged with how do I build a 4-bedroom, 1-bath house in a 20 by 40 foot area with setbacks, the setback issues
Should
that I
those, let me
have.
ask you this, should those, some of those that are currently not buildable on, would they?
Well, no, we're gonna build on them, but the problem is,
can't
I don't
build
have
enough to
parking.
get somebody to
So then,
work.
like, what happens when, we're lucky enough to have a 2-income partner family, and they have 2 cars, where do they park the second car? I mean, the area wasn't designed for our lifestyle. And, I have that problem right now on Martin Street, where, there's not enough parking for the people there, so.
That's actually a good thing. That means that there are people there.
I mean,
people living
we
there.
have, the percentage of home ownership on Martin Street, it's
Right.
probably more than 50% is our homeowners, Habitat homeowners.
So is that, let me ask you this, setback issues and stuff, something we can take up as well?
In the zoning code, yes, we've actually talked recently about going through the zoning code and making
Okay.
improvements, because it's been quite some time.
How many lots do you think
But,
that
I
would
mean,
yield
I
you?
need like, on Elizabeth Street, for example, there's a lot that we own that was donated by G&I, and the lot next to it is always overgrown, it's a corner lot.
That's actually the one that I was talking about that owes about $50,000 in
Yeah, I mean,
taxes.
I would love for that, for the city to acquire it and
Yes.
donate that lot to us, and then we have something larger that we can build a more relevant structure that someone would be proud to own.
And if I could interject real quick, one of the things that I tried to stress in this is focusing on contiguous, because you're absolutely right. The way that we have lots right now, they either are not buildable, like that one on the corner of, was it Winder, whatever it is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just not buildable at all, or with the setbacks, you can't build large enough. And so I think that right there, that's where we're not necessarily advocating for a one-size-fits-all type of thing. We're saying, we need to take these things case by case, and that property right there, that's a great example of where if we could acquire that property through tax sale or whatever, we could then donate that, then, we wouldn't necessarily have to redraw the lines, but we could redraw the lines. Regardless, it's then large enough. I think that's a fantastic
Jack, do
example.
you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I think, really that one of the things that we're gonna have to do, because something's gotta be done. I agree with Jim in terms of trying to assess what we can do with the houses. But I think we're missing a very important piece, and that is an economic impact statement on, because if you look at we're in this year's budget already, and yet there's 3 to 12-month action plans that are going to cost money. And I know that there's 3 options that we just spoke about, you spoke about for quite a while. And, if we had some kind of a estimate in each of those scenarios, maybe by what type of property it is, what the total impact is going to be in the short term and the long term, because we're going to have to afford to do whatever we decide we're going to do.
Anybody want to?
I agree with that. And that's something we'd have to sit down with council to evaluate each property individually. But I would say, so first of all, we do have some money. We're not asking council for more money.
Not at this time.
We,
Why not? I don't know how you can say that.
We heard that.
I mean, I don't want you to ask.
Well, we don't know what the impact's going to be.
Right, exactly. I don't know
Right.
how you can say how these things can be on here, and I'm not saying how you can say that, you know what I mean?
Right.
But
I cross my fingers.
from this, from this particular vantage point, I think what the council president is saying from the phone is we need the specific
Right.
abatement legislation.
Yep.
We need, we need to find out if our receivership has to be expanded. We have to find out about setbacks and whether or not that can help. We need to, in the long term, Jack, it says pass state legislation that would give municipalities greater authority over a tax sale. That, again, I don't mean to say it, but where is it? Why isn't it written?
Well, we did write it, but the problem was it required changes that would make it apply to all municipalities in Maryland. And there wasn't the support within MML at that time because it was something we learned last minute. So it has been written, and Baltimore supposedly is going to be doing changes to their tax sale legislation. I don't know if it ever actually occurred. There are strong lobbying interests with regards to tax sale.
I think if you came to us with land bank legislation and exactly what you were going to do with it, if you came to us with what you need for the non-lapsing account, all of that, I think all of us would be flexible in what it is that we could accept and vote for.
Right.
But I don't mean to say it like this, but we've heard all these before.
Right.
We've heard all this before. Community Development Corporation was 1990,
Right.
somewhere around in there. That was about 300,000 to start. And there were a lot of people in the community who thought you have to find some group that goes out and gets these properties.
Right.
You have things here that says partnering with existing landlords for properties they may want to get rid of. Come and tell me how much.
Right.
That you
Well,
need.
and I guess that's why we were trying to create this plan as an overarching, because we're talking about, dozens and dozens of individual properties. So, it would be hard for us to come to you to say, this will cost X number of dollars without knowing that we have some type of philosophical support for the plan. I mean, that's
What do you
why
want
we created the plan.
My question, Mr. Council President, would be, what do you want first? Do you want all of this legislation that might be asked for in this plan passed so that you can go and figure out which houses you want to put into what? Or do you want to bring us the houses and say, this is what we plan to do, this is what we need?
I guess we see it as kind of like a three-step. The first step is approving the plan in a general sense, like for instance, Division Salisbury. Just because we made Division Salisbury our revitalization plan doesn't mean that we're going to follow every single proposal in the book.
Well, that is silly.
Yeah,
we
exactly.
need to not
and
do that again.
Okay, well, I guess that's what I'm trying to say. And then the second step would be to pass the legislation. And then I guess a third step would be to work with our area partners to look at land bank. I think there are many drawbacks of Community Development Corporation, namely, we just don't have enough money in the area. It's hard to do a Community Development Corporation in a rural community. However, some communities have had a lot of success with land banks because the land bank's focusing on holding the property. And I think a land bank could be one of those things where it exists in name, in that it has this different physical structure that's given to it under state law, but it's still housed in SNHS or Habitat for Humanity
My
or
suggestion
whatever
is
else.
this, and I don't have any other questions, is that we need to close the gap between theory and practice.
Yes.
Our residents are crying out for some sort of relief from the constant barrage of things that come with blight, regardless of whether or not they come from a renter or a homeowner. We are crying out for it.
Yep.
Our partners are crying out to get them more properties,
Yep.
get them more spaces. And this is the theory. I think what I was actually hoping for in this particular case from the mayor was, here it is. This is the land bank that I want that my staff can go use. This is how much money I think needs to go into this, because I think this will work. And that's where I think we should be headed, because I've sat through this in 1990, I sat through this in 1995, I sat through it in 1998, I sat through it and people are crying out for us to do something with
Right.
the house that's blighting their neighborhood and causing.
So, I mean, if that's what council's asking, we'd be happy to come back with a number. I mean, that just wasn't my directive necessarily. If that's what you want, we can tell you, hey, it's going to cost roughly X number of dollars. I don't know if we can take an average of the three methods and figure out what that comes in terms of legal fees.
It would be much easier today to have been sitting here with, I need this much money, this is the legislation I need to create this, this was, that's,
If that's what you want, we
that's
can
what I
do
want.
that.
You tell, you, market
I
manager.
mean, I agree, because, you know, like Jim said, I mean, it's frustrating when you got, you know, residents on Truett Street, and there's 4 or 5 houses that are clustered up, they're all overgrown. It's, you know,
Yeah, Truett
this
is
is
bad.
a frustration where you see stuff, you know, those are the properties that in a couple of years, because they're gonna be vacant for a couple of years, they're gonna be, you know, eligible
Right.
for one of these things.
Right.
So I think if we look at, we've got the areas that we wanna target. You've got properties that you're probably targeting. So what I suggest is bringing those to us, getting us a number of what we need to do, and let's execute. I mean,
If
that's
that's-
what our residents want. You know,
good with
that's
me.
what we're here for. So let's do it. I mean, that's how I feel about it. Jack,
Cool.
do you have any?
You're looking,
Thoughts on that as
Theo,
well?
like, well, that's what we all want.
That's the thing
Yeah,
that we're
exactly.
trying to get across. I mean, you're not gonna get any argument from any of us, I don't believe,
No.
in the fact that we've gotta do something about the blight. But you can't, our responsibility, first of all, none of us on the council are experts in this field.
Yeah.
None of us. So we're gonna look, our responsibility is a fiduciary one. Can we achieve the goals that are set forth in that presentation that you made? And what does it cost, and how are we gonna do it within our financial capability? And I think that's what Jim's trying to get across. I certainly agree with it, and I think that to make a decision, you know, we can sit around and talk in a theoretical way for hours. But when push comes to shove, tell me how much it's gonna cost. Let's see if we can come up with the money, and if we can, then let's plan the attack and go. That would be my recommendation.
That's more than good to me.
That's what we'll do.
Pretty much exactly what we were hoping for.
Yep.
Can I ask this question just very quickly, Mr. Council President? I know we've targeted these 3 areas, but if we are going to do a moratorium on costs associated with cleaning something up, why would we only do it in these 3? I
The
know
moratorium would be citywide.
It would be
not-
citywide,
The
okay.
only things that would be specific to those would be the tax abatement legislation, trying to have the tax credit double. I'm actually proposing to reduce the entire tax abatement from 9 years to 5 years, and then doubling in those areas. And then also originally I had thought of having a match for down payment assistance in those areas. Ms. Meadows brought up a good point that.
Who just rolled up to the
I
table?
just rolled.
Oh, hey, you want to bring up your point?
About the.
About the down payment assistance and, yeah.
When you suggested increasing the amount.
Yeah, mhm.
Yes, Theo had suggested increasing the amount of the down payment and closing cost assistance grants in the city, in particular these 3 neighborhoods. These are also NHS's, three of NHS's 4 target neighborhoods. I didn't think increasing the amount would actually help, because NHS set the limit at 5,000 so we could help more people. The cost of the houses in these 3 neighborhoods is still fairly low, so the 5,000 limit is typically close enough to cover what the closing costs are. So I suggested keeping the amount at 5,000 so we could assist more people.
Yeah.
What I
That
came up to
that
the-
makes sense to
What I
me.
came up to the table, though, to discuss was the cost of renovating these older properties in the neighborhoods. In the past 2 years, we have purchased 9 vacant and foreclosed properties. 5 of them we have finished, and they've been sold to homeowners. We're working on 3 right now. One is the receivership property that we bought through the city. So I just want to talk a little bit about the time it takes to get these done. Foreclosures, the one we were dealing with from the bank in Texas, we negotiated with them for over a year to get a price. They had an appraisal from some appraiser in Texas that was outrageous for this property on Ohio Avenue. So we had to get our own appraiser, our own contractor
to get them to start negotiating with us, and we were finally able to get it. Working with the Historic District Commission, I'm happy that the areas may be changed. That took a year to get Historic District approval. So now the houses are in the works, but it's just long and it's frustrating. It's very expensive. The properties are over improved. We're never going to be able to sell them for what we have in them, but that's okay. That's our mission, is to improve the housing stock in the city. But you have to be able to find funding sources that allow you to have that gap financing, so you are able to lose money. We don't like to lose money, but sometimes you have to. So it's not that we don't want to address, I would love to get every vacant or foreclosed property, but it's just so time consuming and so expensive, and we don't have the funds to do as many as we would like to.
I agree.
Thank you.
Let me ask this question, and it's probably the same for Habitat as well. We do a line for you in the budget. Is in lieu of a community development corporation that we may spend $500,000 on, which in a $50 million budget, would it behoove us to spend that money with you all instead of creating our own? Well, let the camera show that there's two smiling faces in the room.
Yes,
I mean, I'm just wondering about the speed of it. Who's quicker? I'm sure on some of these, I mean, do we have any other receivership houses except that one?
Yeah, we've had, I would say about 5.
Okay. I'm just wondering where the quickest bang for the buck is, because if it doesn't end up with your lawyers, it's going to end up with our lawyers.
Molly, I don't want to speak for you, but I would much rather you invest that money in Habitat and NHS than to create another organization that's going to try to do the same
And
thing.
that would allow you to hire more people to do that legal work, hire more caseworkers for the people who are coming in. Let me ask this question. In these 3 tracks, does anybody know what the median income is in these 3 tracks? How are we doing out there, Mr. Mayor? We all right?
You want?
We'll get to it. It'll be a breather from what we're doing right now.
They're right up there, man. Okay,
Maybe your young eyes can see that.
Good thing I'm up on.
Median household income in Church Street is just about the average, 37,737. In the Hill, it's 26,319, and Camden, 22,108. The poverty levels are 29.4% in Church, 44.8% in the Hill, and 37.8% in Camden.
And just a note from former Councilwoman Shani Shields, she would like the reference of the Hill to be referenced as Old California.
Well, actually,
She's a history buff when it comes to...
one of the prongs of this plan is neighborhood identity, and that exact point, I don't know what to call these neighborhoods, and that's one of the third part of this is neighborhood identity and trying to figure out, yes, we can call it the Hill, we can call it California, we can call it Old California, we can call it Purdue Farms, Southeast Side, gazillion different terms. So that's why I think we should ask the neighborhoods.
Well, I think we have all of these properties on some sheet somewhere that says what they are. So I think, Mr. President, our suggestion is either go back and bring us the legislation and then you do it, or bring us the House and we'll figure out what we need to pass singularly for each one, and then we can have a larger discussion about a community development corporation and whether or not at budget time it would behoove us, with the track record of both of these organizations, if it would be better to sink money.
And
money there.
I'd like to interject about the Community Development Corporation, because I'm not advocating that. I'm advocating for, I advocate for a land bank. And a land bank has very specific powers under state law. So for instance, a land bank does not have to pay any taxes.
Okay.
And that's why I'm saying I'm not talking about creating a new organization. I'm talking about creating a separate legal structure that can maybe sit underneath SNHS or Habitat. Because, for instance, a land bank can hold land tax-free, it has certain powers in order to take properties
I
through tax
understand
sale
that. What I'm saying to you
and
is
issue
it still
bonds.
runs into the same problem that every one of these property has. It's a case-by-case
Right.
basis of how much of a problem it is, what the title looks like, who we can get a hold of, whether or not the bank's gonna play ball. Well, I
But
like
I
putting those
guess
banks on
what
the
I-
city website
What
and saying they don't want to play ball,
I'm trying
Mr.
to
Mayor.
stress is that if SMHS and Habitat could take all of their property that they're currently not working on and move that to a land bank and not pay taxes on that, wonderful. I mean, I don't know how much that would save you guys. There we go.
Go
So
ahead, Molly.
that's why I would like to say I'm not talking, I mean, I may say or Community Development Corporation, I don't really care what we call it, but under state law, there's specific legal powers that a municipal land bank has. And then you can also, as a land bank, issue bonds tax-free. So the land bank could fund itself, ideally. And that's why I'm not talking about creating a new organization, I'm talking about creating a new legal structure that works within.
So
an
Mr.
existing
Tillman should
organization.
expect you to come up the steps tomorrow to begin this process.
I don't know who gets to issue them. I think we have to get agreement from, partner agencies for them to, we can't just say, hey, here you guys go.
I understand.
Yeah,
Theo,
I'm
this
just joking
dissertation
with you.
here is
Yeah,
amazing, and you
you're
get an
welcome.
A from us.
Thank you.
It's the doingness.
Yeah,
The
exactly.
moving of the feet,
Exactly.
the doingness.
Exactly. I agree.
All right, so it looks like everybody is,
Is
in
agreeing.
theory, on
Yep.
board with this.
That's all. That's the best I can hope for.
So I would just, like we said,
Hardy?
just, we'll take the points and then we're ready to execute.
Yeah,
So
I think
that's the
we'll need a few council sessions. I don't know how long it'll take us to compile the list of, or we have the list of properties, but what's the cheapest, quickest option to us? That'll take us some time sitting down with council.
Okay,
So,
all right.
yeah, the council, that's what I meant. Yeah.
Thank you all very much.
Alrighty,
Thank you so much.
Thank you for the work you're doing, so we appreciate it.
This is amazing.
All right, so next up, let's do Chief Hoppus is here.
See the
And I
smoke,
don't-
no smoking?
Oh, yeah, I already.
Smoking ordinance, or are we gonna,
Tornado update?
if you wanna do a
You want that?
update,
Is that
yes,
okay?
Yes,
please.
please.
Yeah, first of all, good evening, council. My apologies for not being here with you for the first several conversations. And luckily, I've got the fire chief and the police chief here who can add anything that I miss. Councilwoman Jackson saw some things out there with her own eyes, I know, so she may have some things to add. But just a couple things to officially, we can't confirm that a tornado touched down, but there's video that looks like a tornado that was captured just by people on dash cams and with GoPros. There may be two locations where tornadoes hit. One that stretches on a southwest and northeast diagonal, I believe. Is that right? From the Princeton Homes neighborhood through and across the athletic fields or east campus of Salisbury University, or actually from a northwest to southeast, and then onto the property known as Hoppers or 1400 South. There's some damage there. Cars were overturned. That's where our only injury, I believe, occurred, which is a minor foot injury. And that person did seek medical attention. Is that right, Chief? The damage that you see in Princeton Homes neighborhoods is mostly trees down. We've got some very large trees down and a lot of limbs and debris scattered around the neighborhood. But the large trees have, in some cases, damaged some homes. Is Susan, do you mind grabbing her real quick? I believe we've got 3 condemned houses right now. We've got the roof torn off of, the porch roof torn off of one house. Susan, can you confirm how many condemned houses we have right now? From the storm? Yeah. Is it 3? Don't know. That's okay. That's all right. Okay. Cool. All right. If you wouldn't mind. Okay. Thank you. Then there's a house on Princeton that actually has the tree through the house. The second floor is crushed, and there's a limb through the kitchen ceiling in the first floor. They've been moved out. They've got family they're staying with tonight. Again, no other injuries. A lot of kids running around. It's with the school year getting ready to start. Is that 2 houses condemned? Okay, so those are the 2 houses condemned. There's other small things like a couple porch roofs that are damaged, but not significant. There is a commercial building that is about half of it is crushed, and that was half of it is gone, and that's just south of the city border in an unincorporated part of Wycomico County, and that's behind the Hoppers restaurant complex. And then we've got some damage to the Cheers building. The signage is ripped off. A couple of the trees in the median of Route 13 are ripped up. They're torn in half. Don't look like they're uprooted. Wycomico County has provided us with 2 40-foot dumpsters, a roll-off that are sitting. The county executive came out and they're sitting on the street in Princeton neighborhood. So with front-end loaders, things like that, we can, whatever we couldn't pick up in the dump trucks today, although I wish Tom Stevenson were here, he'd tell you right now that we have his entire staff is out there working, and he's out there too, and they're just picking up everything. So we're even going on to private property where we can and just taking limbs off of property. Delmarva Power's out there. The power's out to the Princeton neighborhood, so they're working on getting the power restored. They don't have an estimated time yet, and I don't have a number of how many homes power is out to. The other path, the other piece, is from Locust Terrace to the river, crosses the PRMC property and into downtown, and that's, I think, the one that you can see a pretty clear video online that looks like a tornado. There's also one where you can see the tornado, or possible tornado, cross Route 13 pretty clearly, and debris picked up. At this time, MEMA's been in touch. The Wycomico Emergency Management Department's been in touch with us. They're continuing to track information. National Weather Service will be here tomorrow. We've got some flooding around town, some high spots around town, Germania Circle, Fitzwater, Lake, the usual suspects. However, I just visited Delaware Avenue, West Road, that whole area, and other than the ditches that are designed as part of the Cody Cox project to store water, there's no water on the streets, no water in properties, on private property. So praise the Lord. That's that long project was worth it. Any questions or anything you want anybody to expand on?
2 displaced families then from the condemned homes?
Two
condemned.
Yeah, so one displaced family that I met. I assume the other one, Red Cross has been engaged, so I know that they've got those resources available. I don't know the disposition of the second family.
The other family was a rental, and the landlord has helped find them another place.
Anything else? Okay.
Thank you for the
Yeah,
update.
no problem.
And appreciate the hard work of the fire department and public works and everybody out there that's been working on this. All right, so our next item up is the no smoking ordinance. Did I see Chief Duncan? I did. Chief Hoppus's name is on here too.
Well, you got to strike a match, though.
Yeah.
Okay, well, good evening, and thank you for having us here this evening. Before you, we have for discussion a no smoking ordinance. We're looking to prohibit smoking in and around our parks and city-owned buildings. This is something that I know that our Parks Commission has been working on for quite some time, and I'm glad now to finally be able to bring it forward. my colleague from the fire department, Chief Hoppus. Thank you for joining me up here. The reason I believe for your participation in this discussion right now is when we get to designating smoking areas, we'll be working very closely together with you to figure out the right places for those to be located. Essentially, what this prohibits is any city park, and we have listed quite a few of them, which also include other parks within main park areas, where we wish to preclude any type of smoking whatsoever, which also includes vaping. Have you all had a chance to read through the ordinance? And can I answer any specific questions about this particular piece of legislation we're bringing forward?
Mr. Council President, I only have one. I don't mind the prohibition of prohibition. Is that next? Of smoking on or in a property owned by or leased by the city, including public parks. But I think it's a major overstep to put the word around in. That to me is just a civil liberties, and if your car is around the park and you are smoking in your car and you pay for that car, you do what you want in that car.
So as long as it's 25 feet away from the playground or the recreational area, you're fine?
I'm not sure whether or not 25 feet is, I'm not going to say that it's, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know whether or not it's constitutional, but if I'm not on your property, how can you tell me what to do if I'm not on your property? I mean, I'm just, for those freedom-loving people who I know serve in our government, I'm just asking.
So what we're trying to prevent is where you have a parking lot that is adjacent to an area like Ben's Red Swings or any of the ball fields that we have. 25 feet is a reasonable distance. You can find parking in those areas. We're not trying to regulate what's happening inside your private vehicle, but when you are there in the area of our parks or in the area of our Riverwalk, we do want to create some distance so that secondhand smoke will not affect any of the other residents who are out there to enjoy our park system.
I agree.
But if you were to compare this to noise or something else that one member of the public feels disdain for, what's next? I'm veering from my good liberal tendencies here just for the sake of the discussion about the freedoms that I hear so much about. Come on, Mr. Boda, come on now. You got, I mean, what if someone comes and complains that there's the bikes, noisy, whatever, noisy cars? I mean, where does it end? I realize that this is a public health issue, but noise is a pollution, and
we have regulation in place to address the noise-related issues. We have criminal statutes on the book to address the issues with the bikes, but we've seemed to have forgotten about the ills and the health problems related to secondhand smoke, so we're covering that base as well.
I guess maybe one big question I have is the enforcement. How many calls for service do we have year to date in the police department?
Year to date is, I haven't checked it prior to coming into this meeting, but we are close to 30,000.
for smoking?
No.
I mean, no, for.
I think he's
Year to
asking
date.
total.
Oh, I thought you were asking for
Calls for
smoking.
service.
I was
I mean,
like, wow.
one of my biggest concerns is enforcement of this. I mean, it's, our police officers have a lot to do to begin with. We want them to be psychiatrists to determine if somebody has a mental health. I mean,
Right.
seriously.
You're true. You're absolutely right.
And a lot of that stuff has to be done in a split second. If it's, a Saturday afternoon or a Friday afternoon and there's call after call after call, and somebody calls at this park, we got somebody smoking. Somebody calls, we got, at this park, somebody smoking. You know, our city is a big city.
It's a very big city. You bring up an excellent point, and I would answer that by saying that there is going to be an educational piece that goes with this. That's number one. There will be some appropriate signage in and around the areas to back up that educational portion that has to happen with our public. And then the third thing is that we will always continue to prioritize our response to calls. And this will have to take its place in that list of prioritization if we get those busy days that happen.
As with signing, I guess the other piece of this too, if we have to put up signs, so now we've got a cost associated with this legislation. The signing does cost. The other piece is some of our parks are in historic areas, so any signs that go up would have to be approved by the, what about the historic side of the city park now? Okay.
Yeah, so there's actually, and Mr. Tillman can probably speak to this, so believe it or not, and we've not always abided by this, but we would be exempt from that.
Okay. But just one of the park meetings, we had a discussion about the no swimming sign.
Yes.
Up there, that's the.
As pretty as that is.
Okay.
How is a boat distinguishable from a car? I mean, I understand functionally, but why is it that if I'm in a boat and I'm on the dock, I'm allowed to smoke, but if I'm in a car and I'm at the park, I'm not allowed to smoke?
So a lot of these boats are residential in nature, and that is a distinguishing feature. And in addition to that, you'd have to stay away from the tanks, the pumps themselves. Whether or not you're on your boat, you'd still have to maintain a safe distance.
What if you're on the river walk by Brew River? Which I will admittedly in front of all of you, because I know all of you tell you I've got a cigarette on.
So the Riverwalk has been, you will know if this legislation should succeed, you would not be able to smoke on the Riverwalk.
Even in that little path that goes through Brew River?
I mean, we have they have an easement that allows
so do we
them
jump the river you said,
egress.
to the next
No, please don't
one
do
over? No, I don't mean the whole river. I mean, you know, you
Just
have to
jump
that
the river
sidewalk
walk.
over to the part that's on the other side.
No,
I simply am asking because
I think one of the ways that we could handle that is we could actually, and we there's an easement, but we could lease that portion to Brew River. We've never done that. But it's kind of an oddity anyway, that essentially a sidewalk runs through a private establishment.
I'm okay with all of it except the around.
Sir, is there a
Except
more
for the
specific
around?
way that could be written?
I have no idea.
I mean, are we talking like at the
But
city
you're talking
park?
about the general area of the park. I can understand what she's saying in the parking lot. I agree with her there. And in the common area. And if people are parked out there and they're smoking in their cars, they're on the zoo property. Isn't that still the zoo property, city property? So I feel as though, I mean, because even where I stay at, that's a rule. You have to go outside. They do have a common area
Right.
where you can smoke, but either or, most of the time you have to go out on the street if, you know, to smoke. So I kind of agree, because one thing you think about it, when we talked about the cameras last year, or was it this year, getting the cameras for the kids. Okay,
Right.
we want to keep them safe. So everybody doesn't smoke, and everybody doesn't want to smell smoke. So I'm one of those people. I am a smoker, but I don't want to smell somebody else's smoke. You know, so, and if you've got kids in that area enjoying themselves, who wants to smell the smoke? Who wants to walk out in the parking lot and still have to consume it, or in that common area? So I do understand.
So what would be acceptable then to make
I don't know. I'm just
around
thinking,
more
what
specific?
about, do we get to the point where I don't like this type of music? You know, and the music hurts my ears. I understand this completely, but I'm wonder sometimes if,
Well, can we get a common area where people can go
I mean,
and smoke?
are we looking at, you know, I mean, I can understand certainly bench red swings, you know,
Yeah.
areas around where there's,
Crowds.
equipment, you know, where children play and stuff like that, I think, which is the ultimate purpose of this. But when people are in their cars, and the other question I have, as far as the fines, I mean, is that 500 for the first
It is.
offense?
Which is
That-
similar to the littering ordinance. I mean, which,
Yeah.
if you want to
I know
dissuade,
Ocean Cities is what, $100 or $50 for the beach? I think with their fine, smoking fine is.
But could we have a designated area where people could go?
Yes, so in the ordinance, we would have to designate smoking areas.
Okay.
Well, how many tickets have we written for litter? I mean, how many tickets have we really written for noise? I understand this is right up there with those things. We're not gonna be able to stand here with 6 cops surrounding the parking lot, waiting for you to light up, or waiting for you to turn the music on too loud, or giving you the keys to your abandoned house. We should be so lucky after the earlier discussion. I recognize that we're gonna put this out there, we're trying to influence public health and make other people feel more comfortable. So I'm all for that, but I don't want us to pretend like this is something we're gonna make money off in the police department. It's not something, unless it's so prevalent, unless you got a whole slew of it out there in the Ben's Red Wings parking lot. I really don't expect an officer to be called because someone is smoking. I think this is a smoke-free environment, and that's it, because it's the same thing, noise.
Yeah, smoke-free environment with
You know,
designated areas.
It's the signs that say no ball playing on the street. Well, that's very, it can be interpreted in many different ways. So, I mean, I'm all for getting people not to do that in those areas. And if this reduces that because a sign says this is a city designated property and it is no smoking, then I can support that. I just don't want anybody to think that we're going to be hauling people out of their cars in the Beds Red Swings parking lot going. We can only hope they're on a motorbike is all I can tell you, that they're not supposed to be on.
And just to make sure I'm clear, the around is defined as 25 feet from the public space, correct?
Yes.
okay.
So long as it is at least 25 feet away from the playground or recreational area.
And that's what we mean by around.
Yeah.
Well, and maybe it
we
should be
put
just
25
defined as
feet within around.
25 feet
well,
instead.
where it says around, we
Right,
could say.
within 25 feet.
So the parking lot is safe ground, because it's 25 feet away from,
If it is.
No, it's,
No, the parking lot,
Yeah,
if
the
it's
parking
city
lot.
property, it's off limits. But then you have to be 25 feet away from
Away
the
from
park
the parking
itself.
lot, yeah.
So you really couldn't be parked on the street adjacent to the park. You would have to drive away
Drive
from the
away
park.
from the park to
25
smoke.
feet to smoke. Unless there's a designated smoking area, then you have a 15-foot circumference within which to smoke.
in a designated smoking area.
In a
Yeah.
designated.
So, I think one of the things this may help us achieve on top of the smoke issues and the health issues, secondhand smoke issues with kids, et cetera, is that it may help us address some of the littering issues in and around the parks as well. Is, even a car parked right alongside a park, throwing the butts in the park, that's something that we deal with today. And that hopefully this could help, if not reduce through the signage and things like that, then enforcement comes into play where you ask somebody to pick up after themselves and take it elsewhere.
So if the parking lot outside the park is owned by the city, conceivably, you wouldn't be able to go drive up to the other side of Beaver Dam because
You know what?
that's a city-owned street as well, is it not? Come on, help me
Yes.
out here.
It is.
I mean,
Yes.
what's the... Maybe if we had a copy of the
Go to
signs, I
the
could have
city
just
center
gone,
parking
yay.
lot. No, just have a designated smoking area for the people. I mean, that's the best you can do.
Right, if you look at Salisbury University, 7 years ago, 5 years ago, they implemented no smoking on campus, except for the perimeter and various designated spots.
Yeah.
You can't smoke in your car on their property. It's very similar. It has policed itself mainly there, and has seen good results.
Just have designated areas.
That's all University System Maryland schools.
Mhm.
They're all no smoking campuses.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Gotta do it.
So I guess one change that needs to be made is the clarifying of the around to include 25 feet.
We could do it. I mean, it's really just a popular name of the bill. If it's clarified within the bill that it's 25 feet, I think we're in the clear, but.
Jack, do you have any questions or concerns? Are you, any questions about cigar smoking?
Now, I respect the people that I'm smoking, that I won't smoke around. I don't have any issues with it at the parks. And the 25-foot, to be honest, I don't think it's going to be an issue, personally. So, I'm okay with it the way it is.
And then I guess just the other question I have is signing cost. How much would it cost to put signing up?
Well, we do produce those in-house.
Okay.
So we may have the materials to do it. I mean, we could put a price on the labor and if you want, I mean, but it's internally.
Okay. I was just
It's all
curious. I didn't know if we'd have to do a budget amendment or anything like that.
We do all that. We have a lot of that material
Okay.
available for all sorts of street signs of all sizes and colors and.
So with some changes, you're okay moving forward?
I'm fine with it as is.
Mr. Ireton?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm as well, so. All right. Chief, thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Chief Hoppus, good to see you again.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here and have nothing to say.
Mr. Vice President?
Yes, sir.
I had a rough time hearing part of the discussion, but did I hear Mr. Ireton say he was going to walk across the water?
He was gonna jump across the river, I think is something, is what we thought he said, yeah.
Okay.
Which with that back, that's what I want to
Have
see.
to worry about running
I
for
wanna
re-election
see
then,
it.
well, would we?
All right, next up, we have Ms. Phillips again, along with Lindsay Allen for the Salisbury Historic Design Guideline updates.
I'm gonna have Brendan Frederick from the Historic District Commission come up also,
Okay, and
In case
Brendan
you-
Frederick.
in case you have a question.
Okay.
Hello again. We have a resolution to accept the final draft of the new revised Historic District Guidelines. We had a set of guidelines that were very cumbersome to work with. They were very vague. They did not really work as a set of guidelines for the property owners in the historic district to work with. They didn't really give them any guidance on how to renovate their properties, what kind of materials to use. They did not assist the city in preparing staff findings for the cases. There were lots of sections left out that should have been in there. So we, and this was almost from the beginning, so they were, like I said, they were very cumbersome to use. So we saw that the Maryland Historic Trust was giving a grant, and redoing the guidelines fell within the guidelines for that grant. So we applied and we received the grant. We were very lucky to do that. So we bid out, and JMT was the vendor that won. So Lindsay Allen is here to discuss any questions that you have about the new guidelines. The new guidelines going through, they do act as more of a set of guidelines for the property owners. I feel like they're going to be definitely a better set for the property owners and for the city. We have had the opportunity for the residents to participate in having their comments to improve upon. The Historic District Commission has worked hand in hand with the vendor. The city has worked with the vendor, and we feel that we have a very good draft now. And Lindsay is here to ask any questions, and Brendan's here to ask any questions. And so am I.
I have a question.
Yes.
Reading through the description of what, where, and why, one of the issues that I'm concerned about, it says all properties in the historic district. We have some, and Jim, I think you experienced this in your district a couple of years ago, about a home that was built in the 80s and was really, when you go by, it's non-historic.
Brendan wants this one.
Yeah, basically, these guidelines are set as examples, but the first part of these cases that come before us, we determine whether the property is contributing or non-contributing. So in that case, that house would be determined that it's non-contributing due to the age of it. There's other things that go around in our checklist on how properties are determined that way. If it's deemed contributing, then we hold it to a higher standard that on the criteria set forth within these guidelines. If it's deemed non-contributing, it still has intrinsic value to the neighborhood per se. That you don't want to do something like have a chain link fence added to the front of your house. But you're also not necessarily worried about some of the, like, if it has vinyl windows today, it was built in the 80s, that's historically accurate. So replacing vinyl windows is fine. So we have that ability within our evaluation of the properties as part of our hearing process. It's not a one-size-fits-all.
Well, if someone's reading this document, it might be a good idea to put in that there's the definition of contributing and non-contributing.
I do believe that we have some definitions of contributing and non-contributing, and I'm just trying to find where we added that. Let's see here.
I think it should be in that, if you go back one, it should be here as far as.
Yep, determining whether it's a certificate of appropriateness is required during, in chapter 2, or section 2, we talk about the procedures. And there's, I just saw it, I'm sorry. I'm also, I managed this project, but I didn't write the project, so I'm just sort of catching up a little bit on where some of this information is held.
I think.
But it's on page 37, actually. So this is within chapter 2, the procedures, how determining the preservation approach, the factors that the commission considers when they're making their decision, and it's character defining features, neighborhood context, and then contributing and non-contributing properties. So there's a few paragraphs there on what that means, and we also included as Appendix F at the end of the document, the commission's, the form that they use themselves to determine whether the property contributes or non-contribute or does not contribute. So we're hopefully that the decision-making process is transparent.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I saw that in there. But what I'm referring to is up front, because if you get a person who's living in a home on the 80s, he may not get that far in reading the document. In other words, he needs to know that regardless of whether he's in the 80s or before, he still has to start the process. That was my point. I'm sorry if I didn't make that clear.
Maybe we can add, like a front, it's almost like an exhibit.
Make sure you use it.
Maybe we could add on in the beginning said, like, the quick Cliff's Notes version of what the process is. If you're in it, do we have that in the appendix? I'm just saying, like, front, like, first step, you're in the historic district, now what? And then we can add that maybe as a.
Or put all properties bold, and then in parentheses, including non-contributing properties. And then they're forced to go look up what that means.
Yeah, and I mean,
Or one of those, if you feel like you've been a victim of, please turn to page 8 and determine through the definition of Because in all honesty, Jack, I think you're right. I think what happens and has happened historically over the years is that people come in and they don't think that they are. My house isn't historically, and you have to either explain it to them or make them realize, or if they have the ability to make the case. I'm sure, Brendan, they do, don't they? They can come in and go, I don't think my house is historically significant, and well.
That's what happened to that one by you, Jim, with the solar panel.
Right.
Yeah, what we allow is we actually don't take their comment first. If their house comes up, if the property's not been determined yet, that's the first thing we do. We, review it, and then we open it to public comment, so they have an opportunity, and then we can make the determination.
based on a vote thing. But there is a discussion. We're certainly willing to listen.
Well,
Okay, thank you.
And there is, now, that started in 2009, I realize it doesn't go back to the property owners or anyone that buys a property prior to that, or has bought one prior to that, is that now there's a settlement affidavit that anyone who buys a property in the city of Salisbury signs the settlement affidavit. There's been some people that have said they didn't read it, but they're signing the affidavit stating that they realize that they're buying a property that's in the historic district, and they're going to comply with that. So we're trying to make them aware when maybe they're not being made aware at the time of purchase.
Does anybody, Ms. Meadows was here just a little while ago, and she talked about having a house that took a year to get through. And I don't know the specifics of it, but I guess my question for the expert who wrote it is there any indication that these new guidelines could speed up a process? Does it make it more clear to the board members who have to vote and to the people who are coming in?
So this is, in the city ordinance, the way the process works, and you correct me if I'm wrong, is they want to, hopefully, before they're preemptive and before they do anything, they realize, hey, I need to check because I know my house is in the historic district.
Well, that
Therefore-
wouldn't be now Salisbury that we know and love
I
now,
know,
would
that's
it,
what
Brendan?
We're trying to do a PR campaign to let
Right,
everyone know.
good.
There's pop-out information. I kind of had it, every once in a while I have to remind people, just because you didn't see a speed limit sign doesn't mean there's not a speed limit. So you need, if you don't know, then you probably should ask. But we're trying to do better with that, with public awareness on the website and other mailers and stuff. But that being said, typically the procedure is they submit their application. There's a time of the month, like you have to end by a certain date, and then you'll be on within 30 days. You're on the next board meeting. So it comes up within 30 days. You're on
My question wasn't the process, was that Ms. Meadows said it took her a year. Was it because there was no consensus from the board on what to do with the property, or was there something wrong with the guidelines, or was there something wrong with the paperwork that
No,
she
I
filled
can't
out?
speak for the time frame because some of it could be they submitted an app. There's so many different variables here.
Sure.
The process would be application submitted. We review it that night. So within 30 days or 45 days, they have their case heard. We can make a determination. It's approved, it's rejected, or
Okay,
somewhere in between.
let me word it a different way for you then. Have we made it any easier so that the gray area does not depend on the
Yes.
people at the table?
We've done that internally as a board. What we've done is we work with them and say, hey, your application has stated we have some issues with it. We make amendments. We make amendments during that meeting. If the owners are amenable to it, we'll modify the motion, allow the application to move with amendments and move forward. Very rarely do we get to the point where we reject anything. We normally say if that's really, and you're not willing to work with these amendments, or hey, we need some more information, we say, look, withdraw your application, submit for the next meeting, and we'll review it again. We've been trying to be very helpful in this understanding, to the extent that we've, a lot of people, more so on the commercial side, because a lot of people that own commercial buildings, repeat the process. They've come in for preliminary hearings before they even submit. They say it's almost like a brainstorming. There's no voting. It's just you get the Historic District Commission at your leisure to kind of review and help you provide options. So we've done a good job with that, and I think that's been more added to these guidelines to identify that.
And I will just say from a personal standpoint, you and several members of this board have brought that board from a very difficult time in its past that some of us have lived through, and I just want to say thank you. My other question is this. We saw in the revitalization plan that Mr. Williams and the mayor brought to us that part of the target area is there in that North Camden section, and Mr. Rudisell alluded to the increased costs. My question is there anything streamlined here or different options that have been made available to people that may have decreased the cost? Because it is, if you take a look at the number of places that are for sale in Newtown at this particular moment and the ones that have been for sale for a long time, cost is most certainly a barrier if you are not a historic house buff and you've planned to do this. Is there anything in here that has helped in any way, shape, or form that effort that the mayor and Mr. Williams are trying to make?
I would say there's two things broadly. One, we're always constantly evaluating as time moves on.
We have an exhibit.
Yeah.
Yes, if you want to look at this map, we are proposing, and it goes to the BZA this Thursday afternoon. If you would look at the Xed out area within the red highlighted dotted lines, we are proposing to remove those sections from the Camden Historic District. And that is because of the ages of those areas. The houses within those areas are built predominantly in the mid to later 1900s, and they really have no historic significance. So what's happening is that it does cost more to renovate a house in the historic district, just like Councilman Rudisill discussed earlier. So in effect, you know, some people are being held back from doing that and maintaining their property. So we feel that we're, you know, helping out in that area.
And I would say that this is a one way. The other thing is you'll see in the guidelines, there's been, as you know, modern technology comes around, there's modern materials. And how do these modern materials replicate or collaborate or, kind of juxtapose with historical materials? So we've added information about modern materials and their acceptance to historical characteristics. One of them is hardy cement fiberboard and how we can utilize that in lieu of going back with straight, wood siding, and how these things, we're not trying to say, tear off all your 99% of your great wood siding to replace with hardy, but when there's opportunities to utilize this, it is in keeping with the characters. We've done a lot to kind of reinforce the potential for modern materials, and it's also part of an education process too. This is it's always the argument, I want vinyl windows. It's like, because they're so cheap and energy efficient. It's like, well, you look at the life cycle and when you're going to be replacing them versus going with a aluminum clad wood window, like these other alternatives. I understand first cost as well as anyone else. So it's like, it's hard to go up with that extra 15%. But if that means I don't have to replace my windows in 10 years, there's an added benefit. So we're trying to educate in that regard. It's also understanding how we deal with traditional wood windows in a Queen Anne's house versus half the windows gone in an old Foursquare. So we're trying to make the public aware of what the expectation is, and that's something that's more clear in these guidelines now. And also offer solutions and alternative solutions, not just go get a custom window. We have manufactured options that help. It may not just be the lowest rung. So we're trying to play ball in that regard. And a lot of this is backed up with historical data through MHT or regional other historic districts that we've learned. It's like we're not isolated. There's multiple historic districts across the country. So we've kind of reached out and pulled from what they're seeing and how they're working and try to raise all kind of work together.
The appendix for substitute materials was something that was specific in our RFP to do this project, and it was reiterated during the public meeting as something that the public really needed to have a document that would work well for them. So it's sort of peppered throughout the report when we're talking about guidelines and what's appropriate for preservation, rehabilitation, restoration, that type of thing. And then there's a whole the whole section on windows, and here are the benefits for wood, aluminum clad, vinyl clad, sort of go through those options, trying to, like you said, educate and kind of bring those pros and cons to the table.
Speaking of education, and I know the mayor will probably be back here in a second, but several attempts over the last 3 decades to change these lines have been met with fierce resistance. This is going to take a big lift in terms of public. What I don't want to see is this. I don't want to see this come before us and me get 55 phone calls going, you can't change that. I didn't bring it up. If there's going to be outreach, the mayor's office is going to have to do this outreach themselves, because for some people, this is going to be very controversial, especially many of those people in the community who, believe it or not, started this district back in the day. Well, so I would say if this is just an exhibit and this is coming our way soon, I would appreciate it. No?
This has been out publicly for a week now, since last week. And there's been no pushback, and it goes this Thursday to BZA. So it's not.
I would suggest, if I were you, to have some sort of public meeting in the Camden neighborhood at Bethany Lutheran. I cannot stress to you enough, once a vein of our historic preservationists gets a hold of this, many of those who served on that board before you, like some of the other ordinances that have come before us, I don't want to be caught with, you can't change this, Jim Ireton, and me go, I didn't bring it up. I just say that respectfully to all of you.
I would add that there have been quite a few public conversations about this, public
I've
meetings.
not heard of any of them, so I'm not sure whether or
I
not.
can tell you
And the
from
public's attended them?
past elections, when I've knocked on doors, and I was knocking on doors in this neighborhood, the areas you have Xed out, probably literally on every block, when I talk to residents in that area of the neighborhood, complained because their house and property had no historical significance, and they couldn't do certain things, so they're probably like, put in a sidewalk without trying
You
to
will
find
get
somebody
no
in
disagreement
Europe
from me, Mr. Boda.
who
I'm
cut
just
the
saying,
stone. I mean, it's.
what I'm
yeah.
saying is if this comes before us, the line's gonna go out the
Yeah.
door, and I want it to be clear that I just believe that in this particular case, to some of those people who live in the Camden neighborhood who were part of this particular thing, let me ask this question. Is there anything north of here that comes out? Was there any discussion?
The only thing,
I mean, say in the new town?
No.
No,
No.
everything
This is
stayed
it.
in?
Everything, we're only focusing at this juncture at the Camden.
Okay,
Again, it's
awesome.
like anything, we're kind of, these things are a living area, right? And it's like you don't want to throw so much at it that nothing gets approved. You want to start small, focus, and we felt that this was the first area for evaluation.
Well, and in all actuality, much of this will help SNHS's work as well, because all three, now I might be wrong, maybe two of the first three SNHS houses are in the X. Might be right, might be wrong. I know the first one was, because I lived in it.
Yeah, two of them are.
Two of them are?
She said she's really happy that it would have been easier then, but it would have made it a lot easier.
It would have made it a lot easier back
In
then.
that neighborhood, there would be more opportunities for her to.
And just as this board's clear, I'll select
Do you have any additional copies?
Just, and just so everyone's here is clear, this came through, I mean, these X's were hand drafted by, we had a open session at the Historic District Commission, we reviewed this, and this is our recommendation to the council. So that's where it's authored from, it's not, it's authored from the Historic District Commission, passed on for legislation. So if someone asks, you can say, your Historic District Commission is was working.
Oh, I'm
through
definitely
this.
potting it off on you. No problem with it.
And as far as it goes with the guidelines, whenever this passes, when we're done here, we sort of hand off all of our information back to the city, and it's as simple as swapping out a map. So this still.
and the procedure for that, changing the district is just going to the BZA and having it approved. or
Does
just
that have to be
approved.
approved by the Maryland Historic Trust in any of
No,
those places
it
up the
does
road?
not, just BZA.
Let me ask the question then, and maybe you can do this research. If that's the case, the Church Street Historic District, which is exactly in that area that we looked at in the revitalization, can we take ones out of that as well?
No,
No,
that's the
because
state
not
district.
local. Exactly.
That's,
I knew it. I was on a roll, Jack. I was on a roll, and then it just happened.
any other comments or questions, Jack?
No, I'm good.
Everyone good with this so far? All right, thank you. We'll move forward. Have consensus on it. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming. Good night. All right, our last item on the agenda is the fire service agreement boundaries discussion. Mr. Mayor.
Okay. So in front of you, you should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 documents. 5 documents that I think are relevant, and apologies, I wasn't in town and didn't provide these for the packet. But I'm seeing 5 documents that I think help to tell the story. One is the signed and executed fire service agreement, which also has 2 resolutions that accompany it. The second is a letter that was received on April 25th that doesn't have a date on it. That's from the county. The third is an email from me on April 25th. The fourth is a July 5th press release, and the fifth is a letter from County Council President Cannon to the county executive. The one document, the first document, the fire service agreement, as you all know, went into effect after it was adopted by the city and county councils, signed by the mayor and county executive. The second was a letter, and again, this doesn't have a date on it, but this says, and I'll just read it aloud. This is to confirm the agreement made by Jake Day, mayor of the city of Salisbury, and Bob Culver, Wycomico County executive, regarding the fire service agreement, number 1, the city of Salisbury to have all territory inside of Route number 13 bypass and volunteer companies have territory on the bypass side shall go up to and include include all bypass for their territory. Signed, County Executive Culver. There's a line for my signature. I didn't provide it. And the reason I didn't sign that is, this wouldn't have been a legal document. I mean, we have a signed, executed agreement, which, by the way, was crafted by the county executive and the county attorney and the county administration. But we all signed it, and the councils adopted it. And then there was this letter to change it. My response to this was an email sent to Weston Young, because this was brought to me by Weston Young. My response is an email that says, basically, thank you for the letter that you sent, but there are many more details that need to be included if we're going to even consider this conversation, such as that they provide satisfactory service, that we have agreed to a fire service agreement that we've all signed. It references a territory map, and this letter attempts to create new territory. That there are a variety of other concerns, such as motor vehicle crashes on the bypass that the possible new entity has no ability to respond to.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
If you didn't sign that,
Yeah.
and nothing came before us here,
I'm getting to it.
Is there any reason for us to have this
conversation? I think there's a reason to have this conversation, but let me.
Okay. If you didn't sign it and we approved what is the existing lines,
I promise I'm
my
going
frustration
to
level
get.
is
I don't
with this.
want to make it much higher, but I promise I'm getting to where. So then there was a press statement by the county executive to the effect of we're creating new territory, and a letter that was given to the director of emergency services who works for the county, stating that you will create new territory, and you are hereby ordered to create that territory for station number 13, which is a non-existent but potentially new entity. And then there's this press statement that says that they're shocked that I said we have a signed agreement that doesn't allow for that. The county council president and the county council members have since submitted this letter that says, essentially, we have a signed contract, and we expect that the executive uphold the contract, not breach that contract. Of course, I have the same expectation. I don't think that there's any reason for us to consider a change to it right now. However, I believe that because we have an agreement, there are 5 entities that have to endorse that agreement. And that's what's laid out on, I can't remember the page, but it's laid out in here that any changes to territory must be approved by the city, county, and the Volunteer Fire Chiefs Association. And by city, because this is adopted by resolution, I believe that means the mayor and council. So that being said, I'm not encouraging or suggesting that we respond to this with anything other than, no, we have a signed agreement, and we'll talk about it in 5 years when the agreement expires and is up for renewal. But I think it's only fair to bring it to you as well.
If I'm correct, the wording is, if you have a problem with it, you need to come to the other ones, and if the other ones...
It just says all parties must agree, and
Right.
city, county, and fire
So
chiefs.
if the county executive wants to bring us and the county council different lines, he could bring them.
That is what's happening right now, essentially. He's saying the Fire District 1 territory that from the bypass, including the bypass out, should be turned into a new Station 13 territory.
Would you like us to approve, you were writing a letter going, I'm assuming, I don't want to talk for everybody, that we don't want that?
If there's council consensus for that.
Does that help the case, the cause?
I think it answers the question, because right now, essentially, a question's being posed. Do you want to give that territory to this new corporation?
Is it possible for, in my own handwriting at the bottom, had I wanted this, I would have asked for it during this previous?
You can write whatever you like.
Because this is, there are people in our community who, have tornadoes going through, and this is what we're getting.
But
I think we all thought.
They literally wrote the agreement.
And produced the
signed it.
maps.
Yeah,
So I don't,
not sure why this is.
You don't?
What had happened
I
was-
don't try to make reason of what happens down the hall. I don't think it's, well, I'll shut up. Anyway, Jack, you have,
Would you like to write a letter to them, or do we?
well, you probably do not want me to write it.
And you know you don't want me,
and
and Hardy's
I'll
a
just-
lawyer.
That means we want Hardy to write it.
Jack, you write it.
No, I don't think that's a good idea.
Yeah,
I think that what we should do is say we're gladly going to abide by the current agreement. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's fine.
yeah, I mean, there's no,
It's ridiculous.
yeah, this is,
Make a motion that is that what you need?
You
we
just do it
have,
by consensus.
we just have consensus that, we can have a letter typed up that we're gonna abide by the agreement that they created, we signed, both councils agreed to it. And as far as we know, there's no outcry from the residents outside the bypass that they want any change in service.
No, in fact, we have outcry from them in
they
emails and
want to remain
letters that they
service.
do not want any change.
So, I don't see any need for change, and, it's one person that wants to make the change, and, everybody else is fine with where we are, so, that's my opinion.
Okay. Okay. We'll craft it for everyone's signature.
Yeah, craft it, and we'll
think
sign
I
it, and
signed it on
walk
the
it down the
top.
hall. Just who gets to walk it down the hall, that's the.
If you want that honor.
We could draw straws or names in a hat.
We'll let Jack be the last signature and he can walk it down there. All right. So, at this point, we have council discussion. Anybody have anything they'd like to, Jim, did you have?
In the middle of Mr. Williams's dissertation, I lost all knowledge of anything else in my mind, so I'll bring it next time, I promise.
Ms. Jackson?
No, I'm fine.
Mr. Heath, have you got anything for the good of the order?
No, I'll see you next Monday.
Oh, I would like to say this. I really appreciated how the city of Salisbury did come together today. And the act of the, well, I'm not gonna call it a disaster because no one was hurt. There were no fatalities, but I just appreciate how we all came together and worked together and walked the community to make sure everyone was safe and sound, and how everybody just came together, and it was just phenomenal, and I really appreciate that, city of Salisbury, and that's how the city should work. Thank you.
I couldn't agree with you more, and I'm grateful that you were out there. And I think there are a lot of people that also came to the aid of Salisbury and from outside of the area. We heard from we've heard from both of our senators' offices,
Yes.
our congressmen,
Delegates.
we've had delegates walking the streets. Simpson, we've had
Anderton.
Delegate Anderton. We had Senator Mathias,
Yes.
the county executive, was out there.
Yes.
We had, we've heard from the governor's office, so a lot of support. I've heard from the mayors of Rock Hall and council members from Lexington Park. You know, it's
Yes. Phenomenal.
a lot of support, a
Yep.
lot of support in this tough moment.
I would like to take this moment not only to recognize our Chief Hoppus in the building, but also our former Chief, Bill Higgins, is here, who is in this conversation, and I'm sure out monitoring things as he always does. And just thank him for all the years of service, all the things that you've gone through, just like we're going through right now, sir. You have, well, I was going to say you have your hair, but no. But thank you so much. We just wanted to recognize that you're here, Chief Higgins.
If he had to work with you, Jim, I can imagine why
It
he
was
doesn't
a
have
fun
any hair.
time.
You see Mirror's head and Hardy.
All right, well, with that, Jack, safe travels coming back. Enjoy your final week of vacation, and we'll see everybody next week. Thank you.
We are Jim.
Yeah, we are adjourned.
I'm just asleep.
Work session.